You already own a plastic box with a snap lid. It lives in a kitchen drawer, wedged between mismatched containers and a fistful of bag clips, and it works fine. It holds leftovers, it survives the dishwasher, and it asks nothing of you. So here is a fair question. Why did Japan spend 800 years engineering a better one? That sounds like a trick question, and I understand the reflex. A lunch container is a lunch container, but the wooden box in this story was built to do one specific job your snap lid box was never designed for, and that one gap is why a piece of tableware turned into an 8th century tradition. We will get to exactly what that job is. First, look at what the plastic box is costing you every week. Start with the money, because the money is where this actually begins. In 2025, the average worker who buys lunch near the office hands the counter about $108 a week. The year before, in 2024, that same stack of weekday lunches ran closer to $88. A single bought meal now lands somewhere between $18 and $23, once you count the sad desk sandwich, the cold drink, and the little bag of chips you did not plan on. Run that across a working year, and you are staring at nearly $5,600. Not a vacation, not rent, just lunch you had already forgotten by 2 in the afternoon. None of it costs much on any single day, and that is exactly how it gets you. $12 here, a $19 salad bowl there, a coffee to carry it all down. Every one of those receipts feels too small to notice, and that is the whole trick, because they are built to feel that way. That is the lunch you rent. You pay for it again tomorrow and again the day after, and you own nothing when it is gone. The paper bag goes in the trash by the elevator. The plastic fork goes in right behind it. The counter opens again in the morning, and you line up again, wallet out. It is the only thing you buy 5 days a week and have nothing to show for by dinner, and nobody ever sends you the yearly bill for it in one number. Now the thing that ends this, it is smaller and older and a good deal duller than any app or meal prep subscription. It is a box, a bento box, which in its oldest form is a plain wooden container packed with rice and something salty and something pickled, sealed, and carried out the door. And there is one fact about that box repeated more than any other. Center a single pickled plum in a bed of white rice, the story goes, and that one sour plum keeps the whole box safe to eat all day. It is the most famous thing anyone thinks they know about a bento. It is also the part people have quietly gotten backwards. Hold on to that plum. What it truly does, and what it cannot do, is the whole surprise sitting in the middle of this. Because the real idea underneath the box is old and simple and almost aggressively unglamorous. Lunch is something you carry, not something you buy. Carried, not bought. So before the plum and before the money math that makes this switch pay for itself, there is a better question. Then why anyone would bother carrying a box? It is how a crowded island nation spent centuries turning an ordinary lunch container into a piece of food safety equipment, with a paper trail running back more than 400 years. That is where this box was really built. And that is where we go next. A paper trail is what turns a hunch into a fact. So that is where the real story starts. The word bento shows up in print in Japan by 1603, written into the Japanese-Portuguese dictionary that Jesuit missionaries put together to learn the language. That is a hard date on a page you can point to. The word itself was borrowed earlier still from the Southern Song Chinese term biandong, which meant plainly convenient. So the object arrives already named for the one thing it was for. The portable kind of convenience, food you could pick up and carry out the door. Now, people everywhere carried lunch. A field hand in Ohio carried a tin pail out to the rows. A miner carried a lidded can down the shaft. Packing food and taking it with you is a human habit, not a Japanese invention, and I want to be honest about that. What Japan did was keep the practice, name it, and refine it for centuries in a climate that punishes a careless lunch. Hot summers, wet air, cooked rice that turns fast. That pressure is the reason the box kept getting better instead of getting forgotten. Go back further than the dictionary and you find the carried lunch was preservation technology from the start. In the late Kamakura period, travelers and foot soldiers on the mountain roads carried something called hoshi-e. It was rice, cooked and then dried hard, packed light for a long walk. You could eat it dry, straight from the pouch, chewing it like a stiff cracker, Or you could drop it into hot water and boil it back into a meal at a roadside rest. Cooked, then dried, then carried. Call it a snack and you undersell it. It was a shelf-stable ration built before anyone owned the word for it, made so a full day on the trail would not end in a spoiled dinner. Which brings me to the box the whole tradition is named for. The one people picture is the magewappa, the bentwood box from the north. It is made from Akita cedar, the tall, straight-grained cedar that grows in the cold mountains of the northeast, and it has been made in the town of Odete since the Edo period. The way it is built is the tell. A thin sheet of cedar is heated until it will bend, then curved into a smooth oval and held there, and the seam is stitched shut with a strip of cherry bark. No nails, no glue, wood, heat, and a length of bark, joined so the food inside never touches metal or adhesive. In 1980, Japan certified the magewappa as a traditional craft, an official government designation. That is a country putting its stamp on a wooden lunchbox and calling it heritage worth protecting. And the culture treated the container itself as safety gear, not just as tableware. By the Edo period, there was a bento built for the theater. It was called makunuchi, which means between the acts, the box you ate from during the interval of a long kabuki play. A meal you carried into a packed hall and kept beside your cushion for hours in the heat of a crowded audience, and still ate without a second thought when the drums started again. That is a great deal of trust to place in a plain wooden box, and the trust had been earned over generations. Then the box went public and got a birthday. On July 16, 1885, the first ekiben, the station lunchbox, went on sale at Utsunomiya Station, north of Tokyo. It was simple food, 2 rice balls, wrapped in bamboo leaves to keep them fresh, sold to passengers stepping onto the platform. A dated, named product handed across a counter to people who would unwrap it an hour up the railway line and expect it to still be good. Look at what that timeline is actually telling you. 1603, a name on a dictionary page. Kamakura, dried rice for the mountain road. Odate, a box sewn shut with cherry bark and not a single nail. 1885, a leaf-wrapped meal sold on a train platform. 4 separate centuries, 4 separate problems, and every one of them solved in the same direction. Keep carried food safe to eat hours later, in the heat, with no refrigerator anywhere in the picture because there were no refrigerators. So the box was engineered. The paper trail says so, in dates you can check. But naming the pieces does not tell you why any of it works, and the why is the part that actually matters. Why does bare wood beat sealed plastic on a hot afternoon? And that famous pickled plum from the start of this, the single sour umeboshi that everyone says will keep a whole box of white rice safe all day. It turns out we have had that plum backwards for a very long time. What the wood is really doing, and what the plum truly can and cannot do, is exactly where we go next. Start with the wood, because the wood is doing the work everyone hands to the plum. Untreated Akita cedar is not sealed. Run your thumb along the grain of a bare magewappa, and it is faintly dry, a little porous, nothing like the slick wall of a plastic box. That porousness is the whole trick. When you pack warm rice into a bento, the rice keeps breathing off steam for a while, the way a fresh bowl fogs a cold kitchen window. In a clamped plastic container that steam has nowhere to go, it hits the lid, beads into water, and rolls back down onto the food. By lunchtime, the grains at the top are wet and gummy, sitting in a thin film of their own condensation. That warm, wet film is exactly the place bacteria like best. You have opened that plastic box at noon. The lid comes up with a fine mist clinging to the underside, a few drops ready to drip, and the rice beneath it flattened and shining wet. That mist is the failure, forming quietly for 4 hours in the dark. Bare cedar refuses to let it happen. The wood pulls the extra moisture out of the air inside the box and holds it in the grain, wicking the steam off the rice instead of raining it back down. The rice stays loose, a little dry at the surface, the texture a Japanese cook is actually after. It is a plain physical property of the timber, moisture moving from wet toward dry, and it is the one thing a snap-lid plastic box cannot copy no matter how tight the seal. The perfect seal is the problem. The wood wins by not sealing at all. That cedar box from Odate was doing a real job. It was climate control for a handful of rice. Now the plum, because this is the part you have backwards, and I did too for a long time. You have seen the picture even if you never had a name for it. A bed of plain white rice, and set dead in the center, a single red pickled plum. That is the Hinomaru Bento, named for the flag, the red sun on the white field. And the story that rides along with it, repeated in 1,000 kitchens and captions, is that the umeboshi keeps the whole box of rice safe all day. One sour plum standing guard over the entire meal. It does not. The acid and the salt in an umeboshi are genuinely antibacterial. That part is real chemistry, but the effect reaches no more than an inch into the rice around it. Data reference to Japan's National Institute of Health and Nutrition calls the idea that one centered plum protects the whole portion scientifically excessive. Picture the coverage honestly. A small, sour circle in the middle of the box, and the rice out at the corners. The rice you tend to eat first, getting nothing at all. The flag looks like a safeguard. Most of the field it is planted in is on its own. If you have already started packing your own lunch, this is the one correction worth keeping. So let me hand it to you plainly before we move on. Do not stage the plum in the center for the photo. Chop it and stir it through the rice, so the acid and salt touch every grain instead of guarding one proud dot in the middle. Same plum, same lunch, and now the food safety is spread across the whole box, rather than pooled uselessly at the center. That one change is the difference between a lunch that looks protected and a lunch that is. And once you see that, the whole tradition turns over. The famous trick, the plum, is the weak part of the system. The unglamorous part, the wood you were told to admire only for its craft, was the real preservation technology the entire time. The plum got the folklore. The cedar did the job. That is the thing worth taking forward from 800 years of a box built to travel. The safety was in the container. It was carried, not bought. Which leaves the only questions that actually decide whether any of this belongs in your kitchen. If the wood is the real machine and the plum is mostly a flag, is a proper bento worth the money and the few minutes at night it takes to pack one? And where is the honest line, the point past which no box, cedar or plastic, saves a lunch you packed wrong? That math and those limits are where we finish. So let me put the money on the table, because the box only earns its keep if the arithmetic does. Start at the bottom. A plain lidded lunchbox, plastic or lacquered, the kind stacked in any housewares aisle, costs you somewhere between $10 and $25, and you buy it exactly once. Step up to the real thing. An Akita magewappa bent from cedar and sewn with cherry bark, and you are looking at $60 to $120. That sounds like a lot for a lunchbox. Set it against a bought lunch, and it stops sounding like a lot. A sandwich and a drink from the counter runs about $18 to $23 a go. At that price, even the heirloom box has paid for itself inside a few weeks of carried lunches, and then it does the one thing no takeout ever does. It keeps going. A well-kept magewappa lasts for decades, handed down the way a good knife or a cast iron pan gets handed down. Now widen the frame. You already know what the counter bills you across a year, more than $5,000 of it if you buy most days. Pack your own instead, and you keep around $4,300 a year. That is not a coupon. That is a raise you hand yourself with a box. There is a quieter feature underneath the price, and it works on your waistline as much as your wallet. A right-sized bento caps the meal at its own walls. Whatever you pack, the lunch is only ever as big as the box. So a carried meal comes out both cheaper and smaller than the bought grain bowl that arrives heaped past the rim, because a bigger scoop costs the shop almost nothing. The box portions for you in wood before you ever sit down hungry. Then the honest part, because a box is not magic, and I am not going to sell it to you as if it were. Pack the food. Cool. Never clamp a lid down onto warm steam, for the same reason that plastic box failed at noon. Keep the wet and the greasy walled off from the dry, so a damp pickle is not bleeding into a crisp corner of rice all morning. And treat a packed lunch as a few hours carry, not an all-day one. Without a cold pack tucked against it, A bento is lunch, not dinner. Respect those 4 plain lines and the box does its job. Ignore them and no Cedar on earth saves a meal you packed wrong. None of this is a plot. There is no boardroom somewhere deciding you should keep buying. The lunch counter and the throwaway clamshell just make a little money every time you rent lunch instead of carrying it. And a little money times 300 lunches a year is the whole business. That is all the villain ever was. The lunch you rent pays someone rent. The lunch you carry pays no one. And that is the shift, small and unglamorous, that the whole 800 years quietly points at. A box you own, filled the night before, taken out and washed and filled again, instead of a paper bag you pay for and drop in the trash by 2 o'clock. It is the kind of thing worth handing to whoever you pack lunches for, the way it was handed to me. Which makes me want to ask you something. Before the disposable containers, before the plastic, what did your own family carry a meal in? A tin, a cloth bundle, a stacked tiffin, a battered lunch pail? Japan kept and named and refined this one, but nobody ever held a monopoly on the idea, and someone somewhere taught you to fold the cloth or latch the tin. I would like to know who, because it always came back to the same quiet answer. The good lunch, the safe lunch, the one that cost you almost nothing after the first time, carried, not bought.